Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah An-Nahl, chapter 16, and we will cover verses 43 to 52. The Quran helps to bring out the human latent potentials for the system of Deen. These are the references related to this lecture, and this is our contact in case there is any query or question about this presentation or our previous presentations. Recap of verses 33 to 42. Whatever takes place in the human world, it is through the hands of people, and this is where they need to look for solutions to man-created problems. Everything in the universe, including human affairs, follows Allah's laws. Following the path of ancestors and previous generations will never lead to solving human problems which are created by the unbridled human intellect. Man needs to pause and reflect and then use the Quranic guidance to deal with the issues of his earthly life. And this is a fact of life, that if we are finding our world today in chaos, conflict, wars, fear, then we have to pause and think that what is its alternative. The messengers who came with the book were sent to people with clear instruction and guidance to stay away from man-made laws, and nations were asked to reflect on the rise and fall of previous nations to learn a lesson. Differences need to be removed in order to understand the system of Deen. We went through some details in this respect, that when we as students of the Quran are explaining to others that why do we need to stay away from man-made laws, we should discuss it rationally in the light of the Quran, because man-made laws are always biased, and these are biased towards the people at the top. And that is why these laws create classes, and the laws which create classes within human beings are bound to create conflicts. Allah's Wahi guides on every important aspect of human life, and man is told that guidance only comes to those who make the choice for it. The whole path is signposted. If Wahi is followed, then it will start to show its signs gradually as per the process and procedure outlined in the Quran. Understanding this is part of learning the book, because the changes by following and understanding the Quranic value system come within us, within each one of us first. And then when we come together as a consequence of that, then things also materialize in the outer world. The path of Wahi needs a demonstration of patience and perseverance, and that is very important. It takes time. We should not expect that things will start moving the day we have accepted Iman and next day the world will change. It doesn't happen like that. Allah's laws take time to materialize their effects in the outer world once human beings start to follow them, as this involves human self-development, which requires an adequate time of respite. An overview of today's presentation. All messengers of Allah who communicated Wahi to the people were ordinary human beings. Being human, they served as a model and followed the permanent values and helped to establish the system of Deen in the land in which they appeared as messengers. If we think that those messengers were some superhuman beings or different from us, then Quran is not really for us. Quran all along says that this book is for mankind. And now, since the messengers are not going to come, it is each one of us who have to, as students of the Quran, understand the message first and then pass it on to others. And this is something which we will touch upon today. The Wahi of Allah served as a guidance as well as a warning to the people. People were told clearly that they are accountable for their deeds and they must not spread injustice and tyranny within the society. If they do, then they will be visited by the adverse consequences of their deeds. Such a mentality, which is based on the absence of any concept of self-accountability, leads to then being suddenly caught unawares by the results of the evil deeds committed. And this is a great advantage as students of the Quran, that there is nothing unexpected in front of us which is happening in the world. We know and we are waiting that the consequences of human deeds, evil deeds, should manifest at some point in future. There is plenty of evidence in the world to guide human beings about the laws of Allah, including their own shadows, which follow them wherever they go. Everything in the universe follows Allah's laws. Therefore, human beings should apprise themselves of these laws and benefit from them by creating a system based on these laws. In the universe, there are laws of Allah alone, and that is what Tauheed is. And associating anyone with him will lead to chaos, conflicts, bloodshed, fear, and grief in the world. And I've left some dots here because the list is very long. And we can see all that happening in today's world of 2023. Bring his laws into the human world, and peace and tranquility will ensue in human life. These are the laws of Allah, and associating any other laws with his laws leads to creating another ilah, gods in the world. This will always lead to self-destruction, and the human self can never develop on the correct pattern as noted in the Quran. Let us go to the first two verses of today's presentation, 43 and 44. All the messengers of Allah were ordinary human beings, and they were men. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن قَبْلِكَ إِلَّا رِجَالًا نُوحِي إِلَيْهِمْ فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَالزُّبُرِ وَأَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ الذِّكْرَ لِتُبَيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ مَا نُزِّلَ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. Now, as far as this objection of theirs is concerned, that how has a man like them been made the messenger? So all the messengers whom we sent before you, they were also men, and we used to send Wahi onto them. Say to them that if you yourself do not possess knowledge of this, then find out from these people of the book whether these messengers were human beings or angels. We had sent these messengers with clear evidences and laws. In the same way, O Rasool, we have sent this code of laws towards you so that you can make it clearly obvious to the people what their Allah has sent to them, and so that in this way people reflect and reason on this. Some further reflections on these two verses. Here the Quran has referred to the superstitious psyche of the people at the time of the revelation, i.e., they are questioning the receipt of guidance through the medium of a human being who was just like them. Even now, many people display doubts that how can a human being receive Wahi from Allah or their own version of God? There needs to be some suprahuman medium for this. The point over here is that, okay, if there is some suprahuman, will they then accept the message? The bottom line is that these people do not want any guidance. They just, for the sake of criticism and not accepting it, they come up with some excuses. When someone asks them what other medium they can think of, then they do not have any answer. This essentially means that firstly, they are not looking for guidance, as they should be paying attention to what is in the Quran for them. Secondly, if the medium is non-human, for example, some supernatural invisible entity, then how can it serve as a model for other human beings? Because the messengers of Allah not only communicated the message, they followed it themselves. They became models themselves for other human beings to follow them and then work together towards the establishment of the system of Deen and relieve mankind from all the problems they were facing under the man-made system. The issue to which they need to pay attention is the problems created by the man-made systems, and to find a solution to these rather than endlessly complaining about these, and when the solution comes, then to start make excuses in order to avoid it and contravene it, and worst of all, to oppose it. And that is the kind of line of thinking we as students of the Quran should have in our mind, because these questions are asked at times by people who do not wish to follow the Quran. Pay attention to self-development. This is what matters. Another question which may arise in some minds is that all the messengers of Allah were men and not women. An answer to this can be easily figured out by any rationally thinking human being. For example, men can devote all their time to the dissemination of the guidance to others and will never be hampered by the responsibilities of being a woman due to her gender. And secondly, the issue is that Wahi can only be sent to one individual. So what difference does it make whether it is a man or a woman? The issue is not that one individual has received it, because Wahi is for whole of mankind, not for one individual. That individual in any case is a mortal, is going to die. And the rest have to understand it and then come together in order to work for the system of Deen. Thirdly, the issue is not who received and disseminated Wahi. It is about establishing the system after understanding it and then following it. Another point which we need to remain aware of is not be distracted due to these kind of doubts and questions arising in our minds. The Quran has guided us very clearly to remain focused by stating, Tilka ummatun qad khalat laha ma kasabat walakum ma kasabtum wala tusaluna amma kanu ya'malun. It's a great verse to remind ourselves continuously that we will not be asked what others did. They were the people, the Quran says, Tilka ummatun qad khalat, these were the people who have passed away. Laha ma kasabat walakum ma kasabtum. They will be held accountable for what they did, and you will be held accountable for what you are going to do. So the issue should be, how am I going to be accountable for what I am doing in my life? Wala tusaluna amma kanu ya'malun. You will never be asked. None of us will be asked what others did. We are being questioned for what we are doing in this life. And that's a very important point for all of us as students of the Quran to keep in mind all the time and also remind others. We can think about these issues in our spare time, and if we don't find a satisfying answer, then leave these for the hereafter. I put down this comment that if all of us are looking for answers in this life, then where is the hereafter? Because after all, there is going to be eternity, a life forever in the hereafter. Our self will keep evolving further and further and higher. Then we should leave some questions for that part as well. The issue over here is the man-made system and its replacement. So that is where we should be concentrating as students of the Quran. Next two verses 45 and 46. Without the Quranic guidance, human beings live life under uncertainty. Afa min allazina makaru sayyiate an yaksifallahu bihumul arda aw yatiyahumul azabu min haysu la yasharun aw yakhuzahum fi tuqallibihim famahum bimujizin. These people who carry out destructive schemes and create imbalances, have they become completely content from this matter that their strengths become diminished, that they become humiliated and disgraced in the land, or that destruction comes to them from such a place which may not be anywhere in their intellect and consciousness? Very important, because people who follow the wrong path, they deep down think that they can get away with it because they have power, wealth, money, and influence, and have a big group behind them. Or that it grips them in such a condition whilst they are striving and plotting deceptions to bring their schemes into action. Remember, these people cannot escape the grip of the law of requital of Allah, nor can they make it helpless. So Allah's law cannot be made helpless. It is always working. And even now, as we are going through these presentations, it is working across the world. Further reflections on these two verses. Here the Quran instructs us that all evil deeds keep producing their effects and await their manifestation till the conclusion of the time of respite. Despite not being visible to ordinary people, those who have Quranic vision and insight can see the cumulative effects of these evil doings in the world. When these results appear, Mu'mineen do not get any surprise. Why should Mu'mineen get a surprise? Because they are waiting for that. And that is something which should be a good news, even in a very bad situation in the world, that next step will be that life will come out of death. But those who spread evil are taken aback by these destructive outcomes, as they do not pay attention to their actions in life. They call such outcomes unintended consequences. I put it down because this is a very common phrase used on media, that these were the unintended consequences, which means that they were not aware of the accountability inbuilt within their own self, and of course collectively as well. One thing is sure, that the law of requital of Allah cannot be made ineffective or made null and void, as it is beyond human reach. In the world of 2023, we can see that the events based on human deeds are in an accelerated mode. This is my observation. We can observe ourselves as well, but the way to look at it is that what happened in the past, the events took a bit longer to take place. And then gradually these are getting a cumulative effect. The reason is that those in power are now acting on their agenda at a faster pace. Interestingly, when people at the top acquire extreme power, they become confident that the public will not resist anymore and thus let loose their naked aggression and tyranny at a greater pace. This is called intoxication by power. And Quran alludes to that. It points out that this is how human psyche becomes trapped. And we have seen in the example of Pharaoh that when Bani Israel left the place, Pharaoh wanted to chase them and destroy them. And what happened was that the law of requital caught up with him and his army. Few important points related to our psyche in these two verses. Let us go through some aspects of human thinking when dealing with the issues faced under the man-made system. Understanding the functioning of the laws of requital and respite helps us to deal with all kinds of doubts and uncertainties arising in our minds. It is good to reiterate these points because we tend to forget. And if we keep reminding ourselves when we go through these verses, we will be in a better position to educate and train ourselves. In order to understand the functioning of the law of requital, we need examples of evidence around us as well as in the wider world. Whenever we see any event or incident, we should try to look at all its aspects within the context of the man-made system and its laws and values. Being skeptical helps, and raising doubts leads to not forming any immediate opinion. It is better to defer opinions till most facts become available. Then always remember that we live in a world which is occupied mostly by non-Quranic beliefs. Technology exists to make anything appear what it is not. And we know all kind of propaganda being thrown at common masses. Because in the democracy, people want majority to support them. That is, the parties in power want majority to support them. And in order to manipulate their opinions, they have to throw some kind of manipulative information to them so that they can vote for them. And this is something which we observe on a continuous basis in the world. Being Quranic students, never ever support anyone from the political factions as they have nothing to do with the system of Deen. Even if we do not say so outwardly, but have some kind of inner proclivity towards anyone who has nothing to do with the Quranic system of Deen, we do great harm to our self-development. Allah knows the secrets of the heart. I put down this comment because I do observe some of our members who outwardly profess that they are very Quranic, but sometimes they put down a comment which is supporting some political party or some political leader, which indicates that they haven't successfully eliminated that aspect which contaminates human mind and contaminates our iman. And that is a weakness because it's like a virus which affects our output and our understanding. Next to verses 47 and 48, this guidance also draws attention to signs of Allah. أَوْ يَأْخُذَهُمْ عَلَىٰ تَخَوُّفٍ فَإِنَّ رَبَّكُمْ لَرَءُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا إِلَىٰ مَا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ مِنْ شَيْءٍ يَتَفَيَّأُ ظِلَالُهُ عَنِ الْيَمِينِ وَالشِّمَائِلِ سُجَّدًا لِلَّهِ وَهُمْ دَاخِرُونَ. Or by gradually weakening their powers, He ultimately annihilates them. This is because it is the demand of the system of Rububiyyat of Allah that people should remain protected from the destructive forces of tyranny and subjugation, and that their growth and development continues to take place. For the accomplishment of this purpose, it is essential that those people who do not refrain in this way from tyranny and subjugation, that they are removed from the path so that humanity can progress forward and the path to follow the law of Allah becomes smooth for the people. In other words, that the same map is also created within the human world according to which the system in the external universe is functioning. Leaving aside the larger constituents of the system of the universe, have they even ever reflected on this, how the shadows of different things form to the right and left? And with what certainty man deduces time from this? How does this take place? In this way that the moon, the sun, and other sources of light and those things which appear in front of their light all remain obedient before the law and they never transgress these. Very interesting points are covered. Couple of those are, first is La Rauf and Rahim, that Allah wants humanity to go forward and get nourished and develop and live a better life here, free from fear and huzn. And the second one, the example of a shadow is given. And this is very interesting, that wherever we go, the shadows go with us. And we simply cannot get rid of it because we are physical. Of course, our self also has a shadow, but it is not visible. Functioning of the law of requital, why it appears to be slow. Here in the first verse, the Quran has informed us that this accountability moves at a slower pace, and this is part of the process of nourishment and growth. People who do wrong need to be given a time of respite so that they may reflect and reverse their evil behavior. And this is where patience comes in, that we see people doing wrong, but we can do nothing about it because the system supports them. What we need to do is recognize it, and then also the consequences of following wrong path should come to our mind, and we should wait that how these results will show up in the future. But without getting involved into that, we should not give up our own path. We should continue on our own path, firm-footed with everyone else who is following the same path. We do see this kind of process in the world where some wrong laws are legislated for, and then governments do a U-turn due to public opposition. And that is why the law of requital slows down in the case of man-made laws as well. Because human beings are rational beings. Those people in power, they do not want public to go against them because they want to be re-elected. They also do not want at times civil war and other problems for them. Because when people rise up against them, then they are not going to spare them and their families. So that fear prevents it. And that is why law of requital becomes slow. Such reversals do slow down the law of requital, increasing the time of respite. But this also gives us more time as students of the Quran, that we become more embedded in the teachings of the Quran, and we keep developing ourselves to a higher and higher level, so that when responsibility comes to us in the word, then we are able to deliver it. But overall, the man-made systems keep progressing towards their demise, and eventually such systems are replaced by some other system. What if there is no system of Deen in the world to replace it? In that case, centuries elapse and the world remains in chaos, conflicts, wars, exploitation, slavery, uncertainty, fear, grief. One bad system is replaced by another with some temporary respite for some, while others keep suffering. In such a world, luck plays its role for the few, while others are declared unlucky. And we see these examples around us, because if we look at the history, we see that the efforts for pure Quran are rarely visible. And the reason is that we can, in fact, gauge it ourselves as we are going through the Quran now, that to what extent the Quran is asking us to bring change to our psyche. Because the psyche which is required for the system of Deen has to be extremely refined, extremely developed. Further reflections on these two verses, then the Quran draws our attention to the sign of our shadows which follow a physical law. The light casts a shadow and it remains with us wherever we go. Same human being, but the shadow accompanies him everywhere, just the shape and size changes. And this is a normal observation, but at least myself, I never looked at it in that way till I read these verses in the Quran. These shadows are not in our control, and by stating that these are sujjatan lillah, prostrating to Allah. And over here, just see the sajda is explained, that is following Allah's laws. Our attention is drawn towards the law of Allah. Though it is a simple observation in our daily life, even so, how many of us ever pay any attention to it and refer it back to the Quran? One point regarding three divine attributes of Inna Rabbakum la Raufun Rahim, Rabb, Rauf, and Rahim, in the first verse needs some emphasis. The system of Rububiyat invites us to create within us affection and affinity towards other human beings with a view to understanding the issue of growth and development of the self in this finite life of ours. Rabb over here will mean the system of Rububiyat. And then Quran says, La Raufun Rahim. Rauf means that very fine attention, that kindness, that affection, that love towards humanity, which is suffering because of not having rububiyat. And unless that kind of a feelings we generate within us, which is acquiring that divine attribute to its extremities as human beings, then we will be fit for Rahim. That is, we'll be able to understand that how can we work together for the nourishment and development of mankind. Because unless each one of us understands that Rahimiyat within us, we cannot manifest it in the outer world. And that is an important asset of divine attribute which we have to manifest in our life on a continuous basis. These attributes require a higher level of self-awareness in relation to others. Despite sensing the unhappy state of man-made systems, we need to pursue our path with firmness and patience, expecting results at some point in the future. This is important because if we do not expect any results, human beings seldom continue in their efforts if they think that their efforts will not bear results. And developing this kind of understanding and proclivity towards the Quran, that it will take me to that destination about which Allah as Rabb has promised in the Quran. Let us go to next two verses 49 and 50. Man has choice and intent, hence can go against the laws of Allah. وَلِلَّهِ يَسْجُدُ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ مِنْ دَابَّةٍ وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ وَهُمْ لَا يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ يَخَافُونَ رَبَّهُمْ مِنْ فَوْقِهِمْ وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. And not only these things, whatever is in the highs and lows of the universe, all are prostrating in front of his laws. Whether they are living creations or cosmic forces, none of them have the audacity to disobey these. They never transgress obedience to these laws. These are well versed in the harmony and concreteness of these laws of Allah, which are established on them, and always remain fearful of the consequences of disobeying them. Therefore, they continue to follow the path on which they are made to tread with heads bowed. These never disobey the command of Allah. Understanding the functioning of the universe adds to our knowledge. The Quran keeps drawing our attention towards the outer universe and the world in which we live and share its space with other creations of Allah, including fellow human beings. Here, three signs are repeated for our contemplation. First, the heavens and the earth are following Allah's laws, i.e., prostrating before Him. Secondly, all creations other than man are also following His laws, even in the case of man, who has a body which is physical, hence is subject to the physical law of Allah. So we should keep in mind as students of the Quran that our body is following Allah's law. And the choice is ours, what we feed ourselves and how do we live our life, whether we do exercise and take proper rest and look after our body, then of course body will suffer in case we do wrong to our own selves. But at the level of our making choice and intent, we are completely free to make our choices, but we cannot avoid the consequences of making wrong choices. Thirdly, all the universal forces are also following His laws. Why are these following His laws? Because they do not have any option or choice. However, man to whom these verses are addressed is invited to follow His laws or to make his own laws with the proviso that there will be consequences of doing this. So Quran, as we know, continuously reminds us that whatever we do in our life, we should be fully conscious of it. We should be aware of it. And since we have selected a very high purpose of life for ourselves, then we have to be even more aware of the consequences of what we think and do. Further reflections on these two verses. The next verse makes it clear that all these are meant to support the program of their Rabb. And we are aware of the program of their Rabb because it is for the mankind. It is for each one of us, who has created them and tasked them to accomplish the responsibilities assigned to them. They will do all that for which they are created and programmed to do. Here is an important sign for us in this verse. There is a program of rububiyat for which these forces and creations are created, and they function as they are directed to. since some of them are placed within human control by virtue of man's choice and intent. Hence, they need to be employed to accomplish the program of Rububiyat. We can see that to how much detail the Quran is going into in order to explain to us that this universe is for each one of us. And we have a finite time over here, and on this finite time depends our eternal life in the hereafter. But also that if we follow these values, this value system, then our life over here will also become convenient, not only convenient, but will have a very high purpose, and we will be exposed to those aspects of our life which we simply cannot be exposed under the man-made system. Simply those potentials which are related to the Quran cannot come out unless we follow this path. If this is carried out, then everything, including man, will be prostrating before Allah. If not, then for the duration in which this transgression and rebelliousness is enacted by man, there will be imbalance on Allah's earth, which will cause destruction. So it's very simple. The criterion is very simple, that if there are problems in the world, there is fear, chaos, conflict, wars, uncertainty. That means we are not following Allah's laws. Next verse 1651, come to grips with Tauheed. Allah's law function everywhere in the universe. وَقَالَ اللَّهُ لَا تَتَّخِذُوا إِلَيْهَانِ اثْنَيْنِ إِنَّمَا هُوَ إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ فَإِيَّايَ فَارْهَبُونَ. Such an established law of that Allah is busy functioning in the infinite expanse of the universe with such organization and discipline that same Allah has also stated this to mankind, that they should also establish His law in their own world. They should not just acknowledge the authority and omnipotence of Allah in the external universe, while in their own communal and social life they accept the rule of someone else and keep it under the obedience of laws formulated by human beings. They should have complete certitude in this reality that whether it is the external universe or the human world, authority and control in them all belongs only to one Allah alone, not to anyone else. Hence, they should only obey His laws and should remain fearful of the destructive consequences of disobeying these. Over here, Quran has said that if you look around in the universe, you will see there is a uniformity of law and the permanence of these laws in the world, and this is only possible if there is only one Allah, one authority controlling the whole world, and only His laws are being obeyed in the universe. And we will expand on this. Going against Allah's wahi will always lead to imbalance in Allah's earth. Here we need to expand the horizon of our imagination so that we can come to terms with what is stated here by the Quran in terms of not accepting Allah as the sole authority in running human affairs in our world. I put down this to expand the horizon of our imagination because Quran wants us to develop all our cognitive faculties, and imagination, our perception, our vision, insight, all these are tools with us. And these only develop if we make use of them. And Quran actually provides us education and training in that. That is why Quran keeps drawing our attention to the outer universe and things beyond that, and of course asks us to even peep into the hereafter. Let us make man disappear from the earthly scene, and the previous two verses perfectly explain the scenario of the earth and the universe. I put down these next two lines, that if we imagine that man is not around, then all those laws to which Allah is pointing our attention to, we will see that those are working perfectly. Everything is following His laws, and there is no chaos and conflict anywhere in the land. This means there are immutable laws implemented by one authority who, being one, is ensuring harmony, consistency, and continuity across every part of the earth. So Quran is drawing our attention that if you want this, that is harmony, consistency, and continuity in your own system, then pay attention to it and follow the value system of the Quran, and then see how your best comes out. Now let us introduce man into this with his choice and intent. Firstly, he has to be informed about this choice and intent of his, then he is to be given guidance. Otherwise, he will conduct himself under the influence of his unbridled desires, intellect, and emotions. This is the position in 2023 when no piece of land in the world has the rule of Allah based on the Quranic values. Factually, the human will is operating everywhere under man-devised laws and values. Next is, now we can bring to mind the salient points from human history and see what man has done on planet Earth in terms of progress as well as spreading wars, conflicts, chaos, imbalances, etc. This is despite the fact that books from Allah were sent to every peoples with their messengers to provide guidance. Further reflections. Actually, over here, there is a great challenge for us as students of the Quran, that we are finding the word in that situation where we can shape it as and when power comes in our direction right from scratch. And that will be a very challenging task and will be very exciting as well. Here in this verse, we are asked to accept the rule of Allah alone, as this is based on fact. Association of any other god with Allah will lead to problems in the human-run world. Though the Quran has mentioned two gods here, in fact, we see gods being followed everywhere, whether it is religious belief systems, political, or social life. And this is a good study as well for all of us, that if we look around within our own circle of influence and beyond, that how many gods people have in their minds, their own jobs, their families, their parents, their teachers, their bosses, their money, cars, houses, you name it, these are there. And of course, over and above the religious belief systems. As we have seen in our previous talks, any differences existing in the human psyche can never lead to a unified outlook, even at an individual level. And it's very easy to gauge. If we have acquired that iman, which Allah has asked us to acquire, and then we check it in the light of the Quran and through solid deeds, and by coming together, we will see that our psyche has taken a totally different transformation from the majority around us who are not looking at their own minds and their own outlook through the lens of the Quran. And when it comes to forming a collective system in the world, it cannot create harmony and unity. A disunited, disharmonious mind can never create unity in the outer world. And we can witness that. In the long term, problems and conflicts are bound to become created, leading to instability and imbalances. And we witness this across the world on a continual basis. But we need not accuse others and not to be put off by that. This is the way world is meant to be. If people are not following the Quran, that is the way their cognition should work. And we see evidence of that. Why should we get upset about it? Not at all. We should make our efforts. We should accelerate our efforts. And through our own conduct and through our own becoming a better model for other human beings, we should try to rationally explain to them and then move on. Because we have plenty of people in the world who have yet to be introduced to the system of Deen as given in the Quran. As students of the Quran, we need to be clear that when the Quran invites us to the rule of Allah alone through the Quranic values, it means that no human being has the right to be ruled by another human being, as they are all equal. This indicates injustice against the value of respect and dignity of being human. Then the verse asks us to hold ourselves accountable, as this helps to develop our self-accountability, leads to being aware of the higher purpose of human life. Getting best out of our earthly life. Tauheed is the message succinctly noted in this verse. Let us cast some further light on this aspect. Why does the Quran place so much emphasis on this aspect? Indeed, understanding this leads to understanding Iman in Allah. As human beings, we have a certain set of latent potentials. For example, the ability to understand and establish the system of Deen, the acquisition and demonstration of divine attributes. For the manifestation of these potentials, we need to acquire precisely that psyche, which then helps to first understand the importance of Deen as a system, and then through our conduct, we follow the path termed as Sirat al-Mustaqim. So that is another way of looking at others who haven't come to the Quran yet, that they all have that potential to understand the system of Deen. It is only a matter of clicking It is a matter of understanding that, wait a minute, we don't have to accept this man-made system the way it is. We can have something better. And let us start working with those who are already on this path. The self simply cannot develop on those lines without giving an abode to the correct concept of Allah. For example, as noted in Surah Ikhlas, we are created with a self so that we can grow out of the animalistic state by creating and acquiring a new self within us. This is the whole purpose of the creation of the universe and the earth. Actually, over here, I will add this, that as students of the Quran, we should be very pleased that we have managed to create a new self by understanding the system of Deen and then working together on this. Because at this stage, we are trying to clear our concepts and trying to understand the world and the cognitive status of people who are around us and without whom they have to come to this path. Before that, it makes any significant difference in the world. And that state will come at some point, because when human beings run into difficulties and problems, then they are willing to listen to the Quran. The issue of accountability of ourself is an intrinsic part of this new creation, and hence Tauheed needs to be understood in relation to this creative process. Next verse, 1652, come to grips with this fact that everything belongs to Allah. وَلَهُ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَلَهُ الدِّينُ وَاسِبًا أَفَغَيْرَ اللَّهِ تَتَّقُونَ. Whatever is in the highs and lows of the universe, all is busy functioning for the completion of his defined program. I have translated this as highs and lows. Allama Parvez also translates it like that, because sama is something which is at a higher place and earth is something which is at a lower place. So these are relative positions. These are related to the physical status as human beings, that we see the heavens as at a higher level as compared to where we are on earth. So that difference we should keep in mind. Hence, it is also essential for human beings that they obey his laws and should do so with earnestness and on a continual basis. Ask them that even after such clear evidences, will you live life according to the laws devised by others than Allah? And this is the question we should ask others after having understood it ourselves. Further reflections. Here the Quran has asked us to accept this fact based on evidence that the dominion of the heavens and the earth belongs to Allah, and as a result of comprehending this fact, we need to convince ourselves about the purpose of our creation, and that through the Quran we can achieve this higher purpose which is related to the development of ourself. After accepting Iman, our commitment needs to be the cause of the Deen of Allah. Here we are reminded not to let this focus become lost. The results which the Quran expects is through bringing a change at an individual level, and then those who have brought about this change become attracted towards the cause of Allah. This leads to forming a Jamaat which can work towards this cause together. Towards the end of the verse, an important fact is stated in the form of a question to create a drive towards the system of Deen. As we know, the Quran helps us to come to grips with the reality of our life as human beings and invites us to work towards our eminence and loftiness. In a man-made world, we need a lot of focus and motivation to remain on this path. Now, over here, what I've done is that I have two excerpts from Allama Parvez's book, A Challenge to Religion, which now I'm going through in order to get it published in the West, because this was published in Pakistan. But then I thought that it should be published over here. So what I'm doing is I'm formatting it to meet the requirements of Amazon, that is Kindle publishing. And going through these two paragraphs, I thought I should share it in this presentation. First is, armed with adequate knowledge of values, we can, if we want, live and act in full accord with the immutable moral order of the universe. See, the choice is here, that whether we wish to follow this or not. Knowledge does not consist of merely the recognition of a value as a value, but involves a just estimate of the degree of worth possessed by it so that it can be compared with other values. So just acquiring knowledge is not enough. We have to weigh it. Look at it from every aspect. And we have seen that in these presentations, we try to do exactly that, that look at it from every aspect. and then see that what is in it for us. And as we go through them, these keep becoming part of our psyche. Confronted with a situation where we are called upon to choose between two values, we can then promptly choose the higher and sacrifice the lower value for the sake of the higher. Character is strengthened by our voluntary sacrifice of a lower value to secure a higher one. Many may know the truth through reason, but he sees it in the right perspective when the image in the eye of Iman is superimposed on the image in reason's eye. People who do not follow the Quran or do not accept its guidance, they also make use of their rational side and their reasoning side. But over here is that we not only are aware of that, we superimpose it through the eye of Iman, through the eye of our developed self, where we have a far bigger, far wider vision and insight into the issues facing humanity. And that is something we should keep in mind, that people without the benefit of the Quran, they are looking at only through their own psyche, through their own rational side and reasoning, and with the facts available at that point in time. The same is available to the student of the Quran as well, but he or she is at a higher plane of existence because of their developed self and their wider vision. And they look at it that though, for example, some issue comes before us, and if we see immediate benefits, we see that we should not go for immediate benefits, but we should take a longer view of things, because the life goes beyond death as well. And that is what is written over here by Allama Pervez in the light of the Quran. This clear perception of truth helps to lead man to peace and eternal happiness. It helps man to maintain a happy balance between the demands of his body and the demands of his real self. And what happens is that when we make a decision with this kind of Quranic vision and insight, then we are fully confident that the decision which we have made might look uncertain at this point in time, but in the longer run is bound to bring good for us in our life. And thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts, and you may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen.